Welcome back to episode 33 of Tall Boy Radio. Now, if you're listening to this on the day of release, then it is obviously September the 11th. And we're going to be talking about a September the 11th that happened 19 years ago. September the 11th, 2001 is something that certainly the four of us, it impacted all our lives one way or another. And I think the world certainly changed that day. Things have been different since. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and just see where that conversation takes us. So shall we say hello as we always do and tell us what we're drinking? Gazza, do you want to go first?
Hi guys, great to be back. Looking forward to this this episode. Looking forward to people's sort of thoughts on 9/11 and how it impacted. And I am drinking, for those people that are watching on YouTube, Leffy, which seems to be the drink of choice at the moment on TBR. And it's very, very pleasant.
Splendid. Andy?
Oh, I'm on the old JD.
Oh, hey,
look at that.
Yeah.
Well, I've had to put Coke in it because I've got a gym in the morning. I don't want.
Oh, it's always something. Always.
Don't want to faint.
That's the one.
And you'd run out of Vimto.
I run out of the double trouble.
Oh. Was that nice, by the way? Was that good?
Tell you what, mate.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Different. What are the flavours?
So vanilla, sort of treacle, cinnamon. So yeah, it was lovely. Very, very, very.
It's like Christmas in a bottle, then, yeah.
Very, very.
Yeah. Well, we
said that, but it's funny because I'm not a massive cinnamon fan, but even though it was there, it wasn't like really overpowering. It wasn't like just a Christmas drink, you know. It was like actually you could taste it. I tasted more of the treacle really, and then the vanilla, and then the cinnamon was almost a bit subtle for me because I would normally go, "Oh my god, that's too cinnamony. I don't like that."
Yeah.
I picked up on the vanilla and the cinnamon. I didn't really get the treacle until you guys said. And I thought actually, and the aftertaste was definitely a lovely burnt, bitter treacle. It was lovely. Anyway. Kendo, let's see what it is that you're drinking. Say hello.
Yeah, officially tonight. How you doing, guys? Nice to be back. Thanks for having me on again. Tonight is a low-key night. I've got I don't know if I mentioned it. I've got a very bad hernia at the top of my right leg, which has now the size of a large egg. Classed as an NHS non-emergency. So that's not going to get looked at for as long as I can. So at the moment, I don't want to overindulge with alcohol and painkillers, so I'm just on a cup of tea.
Oh, there you go.
Lovely.
There you go. Well,
cheers.
The beer I'm drinking, I'm surprised it's taken till now to make an appearance. Wow. The Delirium.
Beautiful.
Do you know what? Honestly, I swear from the side, if anybody's watching this on YouTube, how many people thought he was drinking salad cream?
No, there's a ceramic look to this.
Oh yeah, he's on it. All right.
8.5, absolute beauty of a beer. We've had this on many occasions, this is one of my favourites.
Go back to where it's Gaz is drinking his Leffy Blanc one. Do you realise you can't get Kronenberg Blanc over here in the UK anymore?
That's a shame because that was a good beer.
So we used to go down to Yates's, and Yates's had it on draft. So you'd have a pint, a couple of 2, 3, 4 pints of that, and it's like drinking tropical fruit juice. But then you walk outside and then you get hit by a train. Yeah, you can't get it in the UK apparently because vegetarians can't drink it because one of the ingredients is a very, very small part of it is made from fish bones, so you can't drink it. But good news, you can import it from France. 330ml bottles.
Andy, get on it.
That's 330ml bottles. That's right, boys. €16 per bottle.
Oh wow!
Get on it.
That was a really good beer.
I loved it.
Interesting enough, though, actually, during the refining process, I think it's called in beers, an awful lot of beers do use fish guts. You know, we're probably talking about it in another episode, but I was vegetarian for 15 years. Yeah. It was the one thing I wasn't that stringent about, funnily enough.
You weren't really a true vegetarian then, were you?
People would tell me no. There's a lot of people who have strong opinions about that in the vegetarian society. Yeah, I think that they'd be barking if they didn't bring it up.
They're usually called cultists, by the way.
So let's bring it back then to the main topic then of the day, which is September 11th, 2001. impacted us all, I think, in one way or another, as we mentioned before in previous episodes. And actually, after that episode, we got talking about it and came up with the idea of doing a specific episode about this. Well, it was Ken's idea to do conspiracy theories as well, I think, and he also wanted to do a specific one about September the 11th because during our release schedule meant that it will be released on September 11th, but also it is a huge topic that would be difficult to cover off with a number of other things in any one episode. So who wants to go on, Kenny? This is the one that that you were keen to talk about it. Tell us a little bit about your feelings about it.
So, it's one of the 9/11 is one of those, I guess, life memories, indelible memories that are always in print. That wherever you are, whenever somebody mentions it, I will personally flash back to exactly where I was, what I was doing at the time, and in fairness, how scared I was. I was 22 years old, and I had no idea what was going on. At first, I thought it was a terrible aviation accident. I mean, truly, just that's one heck of an accident. And then you're just like, wow, this is incredible. Because I remember at the time, I was at Western Avenue. The sun was shining. It was coming through the windows. And I was sat in my old childhood home playing Championship Manager on my PC while I had CNN or Fox News. I think it was CNN. I think it might have been Fox News. We thought that when Fox News was allowed to be on Sky. It's not allowed now, but it was on the TV in the corner. And I remember, glancing to the side because I'm looking at my PC. I'm just like, all right, okay, what?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm talking about it now, and I'm not kidding. The electrical feeling, it just brings it all back. And I can close my eyes, and I'm sure anybody who experienced the event in lifetime can close their eyes and remember where they were. And I can close my eyes and I can remember being in our old home and looking at the TV and going, that just what?
Yeah.
What the heck is going on? And I remember thinking about it as it was happening. I was just like, that's an unbelievable accident. The greatest accident in aviation history. There's no contest about that. And then I remember them cutting to a helicopter view of the two, and there was a gap. And then I remember seeing the second plane just come up and through, and I was just like, this isn't an accident.
Yeah.
No.
And I remember being absolutely terrified.
And I think that was what you've just said there is, I think everybody that witnessed it thought, oh my God, what a terrible tragedy that is, and think about all those people. And then when the second plane hit, it was that dawning realization that actually, excuse my French, holy shit, this could be something different. And actually, and from that moment, you were like, well, if they can do that, what else can they do?
Yeah.
And then your thoughts turn, obviously, being in the UK, your thoughts then turn to Big Ben, Houses of Parliament, Buckingham Palace, and all of those things. And you think, geez, if they can do that, what's to say they can't? So I mean, I was teaching. I was down in Oxford. It was my first teaching post, and there was three of us in the room, and there was myself. There was a head of history called Jamie, and then there was a head of MFL, who was a lady called Emma. And as part of her teaching, she would have some foreign satellite channels. Yeah. So there was German channels, there was French channels. There was I think there was like a bit like an Al Jazeera type channel, and obviously then there was CNN and some of the American news channels. And the plane hit, and we sort of all looked at each other and we sort of froze, and we were like, what?
Yeah.
And then I remember the second plane hit, and Jamie, I'll never forget this. Jamie, who's a history teacher, he turned round. I can still remember, and as you said, the hairs on back. I can still remember his words, and he said, remember today. Today will change the world forever.
Yeah.
And how right
100%
has he been?
spot on.
And just those words, and it was almost, it was. I'm obviously goosey now, and it was weird because he picked exactly the right moment to say exactly the right thing. And had that have been broadcast on CNN, Fox, whatever, that little 2-second, 3-second comment would have been replayed over and over and over again. And
I think we all knew.
And it hit me, and literally, and then there was Emma, there was me, there was Jamie, and we tried to dive onto the internet. We were like, what? So we tried to get onto the internet, and we couldn't get on the internet, and we were like, what's going on? It was like literally like you couldn't get on any page. The internet was down, all the traffic was down, and then of course you start then getting news stories through initially that the Pentagon had been bombed. That was what came through initially. It was like the Pentagon had been bombed, and you're like, oh, okay, so then something really is good. And then obviously there was then news stories about the Pentagon. Then there was news stories about the was it Pennsylvania that the plane went down, they got took down.
Stony Creek.
Was it
Township? Yeah.
And and all of a sudden then you start thinking about the gravity of what you are actually witnessing, and it absolutely, Ken, goes back to what you said about, for me, it's one of the 2 moments in my life that I can remember exactly what I was doing at that time.
Yeah.
And for him to say those words was just like, wow. And obviously years later, and obviously it impacted Andy hugely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd be hugely interested in Sir Andy's take on it. But in terms of an absolute moment where I'd never seen anything like it before.
No.
I didn't really know how to react or respond to it. And then for him to say those words at exactly the right time was just like an unbelievable sensation for me.
Yeah.
And actually, subsequently, sort of in a way quite poignant, is that I actually learned that 2 people that I knew were in the towers the day before it was hit. So that was like, there were a couple of brothers. There was Vahe and Zarig Cooper, and they played in a band. There's like a jazz.
No Reeve as well, who we were at school. I don't know if you know Noah. Yeah,
I didn't know him, but I knew those other 2 through playing cricket actually, and they they were a jazz bluesy band, very very good,
fantastic band,
brilliant band, and they were in the towers entertaining a party or whatever it was the day before, and you were like, geez, literally like, wow, like unbelievable. So for me, it is an absolute standout. Like, it has changed the world forever. It has. Yeah. It's made most governments, it's made most people stand up and be aware of the threat of terrorism. Because I think before that there'd been bits, but to me it didn't seem as though there was like, actually there's a massive concerted effort to take down a country, an economy, a superpower as such. So absolute standout moment for me.
Yeah. I mean, the other news stories in our lives, obviously being in our 40s, Andy's getting there, but in our when we think about, I think probably the Space Shuttle Challenger exploding and Chernobyl are the 2 that really, that made you stop and stare. Obviously, we were a little bit younger when those happened, so maybe they didn't impact us like this.
You see, the other one for me,
also accidents.
Yeah. You see, the other one for me was the death of Princess Diana. They were the 2 for me, and obviously that might be a completely different podcast, so I won't go into detail, but I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when that happened as well. I remember the Chernobyl, but was it 89?
It was 86.
86, was it 86?
It might have been 89, and then it was a Space Shuttle Challenger 86. Well, certainly we'd
have been mid-teens.
We certainly. But this one, like you say, I think we talked about where we were, maybe on or offline. I can't recall, but I didn't. I only heard about it from you messaging me. In fact, we did it in the social media episode. Yeah. I only found out about it because you messaged me. I'd had my phone switched off, and I was building a website actually on the day. And yeah, it still shocks me now. Seeing those images, for me, they're burned into my brain that when we talk about this, I can still see it happening now. It's clear as day.
Yeah.
And it had a huge impact. I can't imagine what it must be like as an American, knowing how proud they are in their country, seeing it under attack, and that, it must have felt very personal, especially if you're a New Yorker.
Yeah.
Very difficult not to take it personally. Andy, what you don't have to talk about your service. That's entirely up to you. How tell us a little bit about it from your perspective.
So service-wise, I never went to Iraq or Afghanistan. My unit went there, but I tore ligaments in my shoulder like the year before, so I never had the experience of that side. But I've heard all sorts of stories of people that have. But going back to like when it happened, I was 16 at the time, done all my GCSEs, and then I was waiting to join the army in October the 14th is when I joined. So I had like a month off or something like that. And I just remember playing, I brought my Dreamcast downstairs to play on the big TV. And I'm there playing Fantasy Star Online, enjoying myself, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's just like, oh, F this particular country. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And I thought, oh, it's just like normal trolling on the internet, like people slagging off people and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it went on for a bit, and I thought, I can't see what's going on. So I just like turned the TV on, turned it over. And I was like, I didn't really comprehend what it was at first, because I saw like, I think one of the towers went, and then they were showing like scenes of the Pentagon and stuff like that. I can't remember the etymology sort of thing, but I just didn't really take it in and comprehend what actually was happening at the time. I was just like, what is this? Like, I was just like glued to it, thinking, like, what's going on here? Then I remember I just went back to my Dreamcast sort of thing and then see what other people are saying. And I think it was like a few hours later, I think my mum came home from work, and then we were just like watching the news all night. And I was just like, oh wow, like this is going to be quite big.
Yeah.
And then that was pretty much it for like a couple of days. It was just like, obviously it was all on the news and stuff like that. And then it started creeping in a bit more, like, it's quite a big change, and they're going to do this, going to do that. And I can't say it really directly affected me until like I remember in basic training, nothing training wise, it didn't change anything apart from at night maybe when people, they used to like, the basic training is about putting people under pressure. So you have like 5 hours sleep and stuff like that every night, and you do lessons all day. You do like physical training like on and off throughout the day, so you're knackered and your brain's tired as well. And then like other people try messing with your head, saying, "Oh, we're all going to Iraq after we finish training and all that stuff." And it's just like, oh shit, I don't think I'm ready for that. I was like I was like a 9.5 stone, 16-year-old sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like, but as thing is with the army, you train for everything, sort of things, within reason. So by the time I did like my phase 2, which is your trade training, it's sort of like things started clicking into place then, like actually what all that meant. So the unit I joined, I won't mention numbers and stuff like that, but it's a mechanized unit. And then they do 3-year cycles of like a training year, an operational year, and then like a rest year, they call it. So in that operational year, you'll go out to, wherever it is, Falklands, Iraq, or whatever. So they did all that sort of stuff. I supported from the UK, whether it's just like, any returns of kit coming back, I just had to turn that sort of stuff around. And I know people have, lost friends and stuff like that. But I genuinely can't really say what they experienced, to be honest. I suppose I was lucky, and so at the time I was like, oh, I really want to go there, but I couldn't even like lift my arm up. So I was like, and now I look back on it, I'm pretty glad I didn't go, because it's quite hot over there. Just to throw in some humour, but no, it's changed everything. Like even if like I wasn't in the army, I realised how much has changed because of that. Just for the fact of airline travel is different. Security, just in general, like going football games, it probably changed stuff like that, any mass gatherings, I think. Yeah. And also the laws, like everything, the whole everything's changed basically, didn't it? I mean,
it did, and you went from not really understanding what, and excuse the phrase, a suicide bomber would. That wasn't really a phrase that was used. It wasn't really a terrorism. We didn't really sort of understand. We hadn't really had
still don't really understand it, to be honest with you.
No, and you might understand. You might try to rationalize their ideology, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. You have to sort of try to rationalize it. Say they obviously felt as though they did have an ideology, and so. And I'm actually, interestingly, obviously quite tragically, there was the terrorist attacks in London, which actually was, and I remember the day. It was the 7th of July, which is my birthday. So I do remember, was it a tube attack, and there was a bus attack sort of thing. So. And I think, and obviously there's been subsequently, I think Spain's underground, I think has been, or train lines have been hit and stuff. So there's various attacks. But 9/11 was obviously, or whether it was the first of its kind, it's the one that resonates with, I would suggest,
it's the biggest
90% of the Western world. That's the one that you remember. That's the one. That's the biggie. And it was literally, we are going after the heart of America. What is the biggest sort of symbol, other than the Statue of Liberty? But what is one of the biggest symbols of America? And we're going to go after it. Well, where is the American sort of government, other than Washington, into the military government? Where does that sit? The Pentagon. We'll go in and go after that.
And also, New York is the trade center.
Yeah,
it's the World Trade
absolutely.
Center. Hitting them.
And actually, there was a World Trade Center bomb. When was that?
Yeah, there's been a number of attacks.
So there was a number.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was finished in 1973. The World Trade Center, obviously, a year that we're familiar with. We were born then.
Yeah.
Broke ground, I think, in the late 60s, or I think it was on mid 60s. It was around about. I know the date was August the 6th, which is my wife's birthday.
Right.
I remember reading that. But yeah, there was a bomb underneath it in the car park as well. I seem to recall. But just taking Andy back as well to what he said about how travel has changed and how, because it does impact how our lives have changed. Buddy Shiner mentioned it on one of the episodes. I think they did an episode on September the 11th last year,
right?
And they talked about them, but since then, with COVID and everything coming in, and he was saying to his barber, I can't wait to get rid of this mask. It is really getting on my nerves, this single file into shops and the way it's controlled. And his barber turned around and said to him, well, have you ever thought this might be how it's going to be going forward? After 9/11, we were made to take our shoes off at airports, and you thought, this is going to get old soon. But 19 years on, we're still doing it.
Is it the new normal?
Yeah, exactly. And it's impacted red tape around passports as well now. It's huge.
But it's also interesting in terms of, and I don't know whether they have relaxed it somewhat now. And obviously, any of you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously post 9/11. There was absolutely no access to the cockpit, like none.
No.
Like even, excuse me, I've got my little boy who's got his 8th birthday. Can he come and look at the cockpit? And that used to happen all the time. And you go meet the pilot. So access to the cockpit gone completely. Just absolutely, that's not going to happen. You started getting air rangers who were effectively employed to be on planes, ready for and trained for this type of action. And when you sit there and you think, bloody hell, sort of thing, they downed, when was the last time, if ever, and I don't know whether they did, the American Aviation Authority downed all of their planes.
Yeah.
Literally all of their planes. And when you think about the absolute, air traffic controllers must have been tearing their hair out, literally, like, in terms of the logistical problems in effectively landing every single plane. You just think, now I know we're now years later and aviation has got back to perhaps the point that it was, but it absolutely impacted how you went from A to B. Andy's exactly right. Your mass gatherings, your train stations, your airports, your ports, all of those big mass gathering, the Manchester Arena bomb, was it the Ariana Grande concert? So you can't, all your big gatherings, all of a sudden you had these security measures in place. And you were like, is that the new normal? And years later, Adam made a great point. Actually, it is. We're still doing those things. We're still having to take our shoes off. We're still having to go through the metal detector. We're still having to put things through security. And this is like years later. So it had a massive impact. Absolute massive impact.
And the other thing that when we talk about these acts of terrorism, which is what it was, the one impact that they've all had is actually to unite a country, to unite a community against these people. So, I mean, ultimately, what they've done with the terror, it's ultimately failed every single time because
it's counterproductive.
It 100% is. The community.
We're trying to break up the community, and so and what
risen above it every time.
I mean, talk about the New Yorkers, and obviously there's a couple of great documentaries, and obviously there was a feature film made about passenger 42, 52, whatever it was, the plane number 53 or whatever. Yeah. So but in terms of uniting a city, it literally was, and obviously we're talking from being UK residents, but you look at some of the interviews, some of the documentaries that have been made, the Americans and particularly the New Yorkers absolutely felt it was a personal attack on them. And you just had to listen to the heroic nature of firefighters that were coming in from states around. Literally you've got civilians running away and you got firefighters running in. And you were like, what courage, what bravery, and all of those things. And I remember watching, some video footage, and it only really emerged sort of a day later, or and there was a handheld camera, and as the towers came down, just the dust, the debris, and literally this camera guy was engulfed, and I think he ended up just lying under a car. I think he literally just dived under a car, and he got his video camera pointing out, and it literally went from day to night. It literally was like, and you're like, geez,
it's like nothing else we've ever seen.
Like talk about almost like an apocalyptic world. You're like, that's what it's like, and you're like, geez, and so being an American, and obviously, it is, I suppose, still quite a poignant subject for Americans. But if we've got listeners in America, and if any of you want to get in touch with us in terms of your personal memories or how it affected you, or you want to make a comment, then obviously go and visit us on all the social medias and stuff. But I'd be fascinated to get some feedback from some Americans that perhaps it'd be great if they were either there or they had sort of first-hand experience of it, or just what their perception of it was being American. Do you know what I mean? And we're talking about being four guys that are resident in the UK, but it would be fascinating to me if we could, if there's any feedback from any Americans that are listening to us that want to get in touch with us just to share your recollections, your memories, your thoughts, your feelings. That would be amazing. So please, if you feel as though you can do that, get in touch with us. And that would be, because it's all very well feeling how it affects you, but we're resident in the UK. We're not American, so we're slightly detached. While it had an impact on us, and we can remember exactly where we were, I didn't necessarily feel as though it was a personal attack to me. It impacted me in terms of, I was there, I remember it, and that very prophetic statement that Jamie made, which is right. But it didn't personally affect me. I think Andy made the point. It didn't personally affect him as such. No. But I think your reaction to it was more than
Interesting enough, actually, I visited New York in 2005, so 4 years after it happened, and obviously I couldn't go there without going to Ground Zero. And New York is a very, very noisy city, but while you're there, it felt quiet. There was a silence about it. And I don't know if it made me feel very somber while I was there. It made me reflect upon it, because this is, at the time when they were building the monument to it, and that the work on that had started. The clear job had been done, and they were getting preparing to build the new Freedom Tower. But it was a very emotive feeling that it brought upon me. I've visited New York since. I've seen the new tower there, and it's phenomenal. But yeah, and my brother actually he went prior to 2001. My youngest brother Mark, so he's actually been up to the top of the World Trade Center and viewed New York from there.
Wow.
Something he remembers, but at the time doesn't really talk about it other than the view, because when you think about the New York skyline, yes, they were a quarter of a mile high, dominant, but not the most famous of the buildings that we think about as tourist hotspots. But since then, obviously, they've come to mean something different. And I can remember watching an episode of Cribs. Yeah, it was being repeated on MTV, and I think it was the guy from Run DMC literally lived right next to it, and he was out on his balcony, and you had these huge towers, and at night they were beautiful. Yeah. But obviously, his property was destroyed in the attack.
Wow.
So Ken, when you wanted to talk about this episode, obviously, you come at it from an interesting perspective, don't you? Because the conspiracy theories was the one that we did at the last episode, and we talked about some very interesting things. And there are a number of conspiracy theories, and we don't want to upset anybody about talking about them, but they exist. We're going to look at them. If we can debunk them, we will. But I'd just be interested to know everybody's perspectives and beliefs. And if you're a listener as well, like Gaz said, get in touch. Let us know if you think if you disagree with us. That's fine. Let us know. We just want positive.
Just before Ken gives us his take on it, I'd be interested, Tiddy Shiner, if you're listening, if you did the show on 9/11. I don't know whether you covered the sort of conspiracy side of it or not, or you just mentioned it. I don't know.
No, they covered it quite heavily, actually. And interestingly enough, that for years they've been talking about doing a conspiracy theory episode based on that. Not got around to doing it yet, so.
Ken still, there you go.
Ken jumped in and got ahead of him. But seriously, Tiddy Shine, if you are listening, and I know you do listen, if you've got this far into the episode, we're not upset you yet.
Yeah.
Get that conspiracy episode, because I'd love to hear that tip, because those two guys aren't afraid to share a contentious issue or two.
Again, it would be interesting if they do the conspiracy theory from being two Americans, and their take on the conspiracy theory side, and then obviously Ken, who is a big, I would say, conspiracy theorist, if that's the right phrase.
Well, interesting enough, Big Tiddy is as well. Yeah, he buys into that, and he again, like Andy, has served in the army. He's done his service for his country, and happily talks about that on the podcast. Also, go listen to that, because it is a very, very good.
But Tiddy, Shiny, get in touch.
I don't mind being loaned out to their podcast for this one. I don't mind.
So the next
TBR a shout out. It's fine.
Yeah. So the Tiddy and Shiner show introducing Ken.
Yeah.
That's got a nice suggestion. But yeah, if you're there, Tiddy Shiny, if get in touch and let us know what you think about what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. So go on, Ken. Then give us your perspective on it.
As I say, at the time, 20 years old, utterly terrified. I remember a guy coming to the door to try and sell either double glazing or something like that. I remember knocking on the door, and I opened the door, and he was just like, "All right, mate." I was just like, "Mate, do you actually have an idea of what's actually happened today?" And he's just like, "No, why?" And literally, it's one of those situations where I didn't know the guy from at all, but I was just like, "Come in, mate." Made him a cup of tea and sat him down on our sofa, and we literally watched it, and he was just like staggered. And he said, "You know what? I'm going to sack off the rest of the day. I'm not bothered," because he was scared as well. He didn't know if the world was ending tomorrow or not. And he was just like, "Do you know what? I'm just going to go home and spend quality time with the missus." And he's just like, "Thanks a lot, mate. Nice one," and walked out. And that was, again, as you guys have quite rightly pointed out, the entire point is with these terrorism attacks is to divide people, to create dissension, to create friction. And what it does is, I've never seen that guy again. Yeah. But that day, I invited him into my house, made him a cup of tea, and let him watch TV on my sofa, because it brought us together as human beings. Yeah. And I think, from the perspective of that, I've always had, and I'm sure Adam knows to a greater or lesser degree, I've always had from a very young age an affiliation with the American culture, Americanism, the pursuit of excellence, and anybody being allowed to go and be whatever they want to be, and not being slowed down or held back or anything like that. And if you're good enough to do something, then you can achieve in America.
Yeah.
And I've always said, from American sports to the actual American, as I say, culture. And I remember even now, and I'm 41 years old now, I still find it very, very difficult to watch documentaries on 9/11.
Yeah.
I find it very, very difficult to to listen to the phone calls that people made.
Yeah.
The air traffic controllers who had no idea that their day when life was about to change in ways they couldn't possibly understand. And it's difficult to put all that, compartmentalize that when something so massive, and that's, as you guys have said, it was life-changing, world-changing. But it's difficult to put that sort of thing into perspective when you start thinking along the lines of why now? What's causing this, and why is this? And then you start reading into things, and you start reading books. And I remember watching a film called Loose Change, which I think is now up to version 7 or version 8 now. But that was one of the first documentaries I actually watched, where it was just like, hold on. And you genuinely do not believe, as a 22-year-old, you do not believe that a country would try and hoodwink its own civilians on such a massive scale.
Yeah.
But as I believe was stated by Germany during the Second World War, the more you tell the lie, the more people will believe it, and the bigger the lie, the more unbelievable it is, and the more people will eventually believe it. I'm probably butchered the quote, but the point remains: the bigger the event, the more people initially was like, "Oh my God!" And in fairness, I spoke to my mum at great length about signing up, joining the army to go and do something to go and do something to effectively protect my brothers, to protect my mum, to protect my friends.
Yeah.
That I felt like I could do something. And my mum, my dad served in Korea. He was in the North Staffordshire Regiment. His regiment is actually got like a 2-minute bit on a history documentary about Korea. But he served in Korea, and obviously he wasn't around when this happened, but he'd have let me. He'd have said, go and do it. But my mum talked me out of it, I think, because my mum is very she wouldn't have wanted a letter or a phone call home saying your firstborn son has been killed in action. And she made a very strict point, a very deliberate point of saying, oh, they'll need people like you. And at that point I was just like, no, I've got to go and do something. And mum was like, no, they'll need, no, don't do it. And then obviously I didn't. And I don't regret a lot, but I think it would have been interesting from my own perspective if I'd actually just put my foot down. She would have given me her blessing and said go if that's what I really wanted to do. But so to say way back, it's just like you do sit there, and the bigger the lie, you can't possibly imagine that a government would do that sort of thing, would effectively sacrifice nearly 3,000 people and billions and billions and billions of dollars to propagate a war.
Yeah.
So the first ones, the first time after watching Loose Change, I sat there and looked at it, was the way the buildings came down. Now, these are massive buildings. These are 47 stories. They're huge buildings, and they came down within their own building footprint, which is instead they didn't fall over sideways, they didn't lean or fracture or anything. They all came down at once on themselves, which, as most people will tell you, and the civil engineers will tell you, is demolition.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was like, okay. There's also a little known one that people don't tend to talk about because it's not particularly mentioned in dispatches, is World Trade Center 7. The 7th tower, which effectively concertinaed on itself, again, in its own footprint. Obviously, there's thousands of buildings in this surrounding area which were damaged, either hit by debris or fire but there's a section, I believe there's an interesting, I think a 2-minute video from the BBC where they're interviewing someone from New York, this lady and this woman, and one of the reporters is saying, and World Trade Center 7 has come down, but in the background over her left shoulder, the building's still standing. Which was another interesting one. The Pentagon being hit as well is an interesting one because they want people to accept that it was a plane that hit it, but there's very little debris to suggest a plane actually did hit it. The hole isn't big enough for a plane to hit it. There's these planes are designed to hit these buildings and then to literally just fall apart. So if you go nose first into a building, the nose is going to crumple. And then you're going to get to a point where the wings are designed literally just to fall off, not go tearing through a building, and then the nose coming out the other side. So there's lots of different conspiracy theories with regards to it. So some suspect it's insurance fraud because the day before the towers were insured for an astronomical amount of money. And then I'm trying to remember who it was, but the guy who actually insured them afterwards sued for double money because he said it was an unprecedented event and he had 2 towers, and he won.
Right.
There's the air defense system. The air defense is an interesting one as well because there were training flights, but they went out over the Atlantic, not internally, which is another interesting wrinkle to it. There is a lot. Some say that that the whole thing was missile strikes. Very, very. There's a school of thought that suggests that they were missile strikes. All of them were missile strikes, but they're just very, very impressive holograms. Either empty planes or empty shells, and just used to make this happen. The one in the one that was in Pennsylvania, Shanksville in Pennsylvania, that doesn't look. Even if you look at it from the top down, it doesn't look like a plane's gone into the ground. The Pentagon certainly doesn't look like a plane's hit into the building. Again, it looks. And the interesting one about the Pentagon is, of course, of all the cameras, there was one from a petrol station, I believe, across the road.
Yeah.
But the footage for that was taken within minutes by the actual authorities. So only then do you get frames of it, and it just doesn't look like a plane. If anything, it looks like an intercontinental ballistic missile.
Yeah.
And these are all highly controllable devices. And this is in no way trying to throw disrespect on the event. It was mind-bending at the time. It's still mind-bending now. But I don't believe that everything we're told is the truth.
What do you believe that out of those that you just shared? So, you've shared some pretty shocking stuff when you break it down and look at it, at the ground level. Do you believe a pretty good portion of that? Clearly, I know you I don't even know where to start with those, dude. But
I know they are heavyweight, and they are a lot to take on board.
You see, I actually when we were doing the conspiracy theory episode, I went online and did a little bit of sort of 9/11 conspiracy theory research as such, and came across various photos, various sort of interviews and comments, which actually don't sort of add up. And then, admittedly, I didn't spend a lot of time trying to find the debunking page from them. But what one? To be fair, there's a couple of videos where people came on and said you can Photoshop anything hitting a building, and literally changed the plane hitting the tower into a UFO, into a giant elephant, and it looked like a giant elephant had hit.
Absolutely.
So there's all sorts of stuff you can do, but and again, it could be photoshopped, it could be fake. There was an image of an explosion within one of the towers.
Yes.
fractionally prior to when one of the planes hit.
Yes.
And the argument is basically, whoever it was, the demolitions guy got it wrong. Basically they detonated the explosion, the bomb, whatever it was, too early, and actually it exploded before the plane hit because it was meant to hit and explode simultaneously to make it look like it was the plane hitting and stuff. So you look at that, but then you think, and this is where perhaps I sort of disagree with you in a way, Ken, on this, which is odd because we seem to have agreed a lot on previous podcasts.
If we were all the same, the world would be boring.
I can't believe, I don't want to believe, but I also can't believe that a government would knowingly sacrifice 3,000 or whatever it was, however many thousand people died, and however many more thousands of people's businesses and homes and everything else were.
So what you're not? I'm going to put words in your mouth here, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or not.
Okay.
So you're not just saying you can't, you can't, you won't. Are you saying you don't believe?
I believe a plane hit the tower, brought it down, and I believe that the pilots of those planes were terrorists. I don't believe in this conspiracy theory about it being a government cover-up, about it being. So I'll hold my hands up and I'll say, and it was absolutely sort of world-changing. But for me, and I now spoke about previous conspiracy theories on a different episode, but for me, this conspiracy theory, not for me. I think what we are told happened.
Yeah,
that's my take.
No, I'll be honest with you. I'm 100% with you on that one. I think 19 people in the US that morning knew what was going to happen, and those are the 19 people that hijacked those planes. The motives, you can question them, whether it's what they felt about the West and how they've been treated in the past. I'm not interested in that. That is. It's thoroughly evil in my eyes. It's thoroughly evil. And those 19 people got up that morning, hijacked the 4 planes as it was. 265 people on the planes lost their lives because of the actions. Before you look at how many people were in the Pentagon, 184, 2,606 people in the 2 towers. 343 firefighters, 71 law enforcement officers, all lost their lives because of the action of those 19 people. And I don't believe or accept that the US government or anybody else, whether it be insurance companies, insurance fraud or anything, had anything to do with it other than that. I could be wrong, but again...
Let's hope you're not.
Yeah, let's hope I'm not.
Yeah,
let's hope I'm not.
I mean, there's the famous old phrase, money talks, and and money does talk. Does it talk to the extent of effectively sacrificing the near on 3,000 people? Look, if I'm wrong, I'll hold my hand up, and if it ever comes out in public galleries in 40, 50, 60 years' time in terms of documents, whatever, then I'll hold my hand up.
I suspect they'll all be redacted by then.
Absolutely. For me, the events that we saw were the events that happened, and for me, there's no conspiracy. I get why some people might think there might be, and there's evidence online. I say evidence. There's evidence, there's counter evidence, and there's debunking and all sorts of stuff online. So I get the fact that some people might think that there's a conspiracy behind it.
We talked about this, I think, when we mentioned, I can't remember which episode we mentioned Princess Diana, actually. But conspiracy theories exist because the truth that you're faced with is too far-fetched to believe.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And this is one of those incidents where you're seeing something, but it is so difficult to accept that this is the truth.
Yeah. You start looking. Well, there has to be another reason.
Reason for
there has to be something else. There must be another reason. Yeah, there are.
Absolutely. I guess in some respects, and I would counter what you guys are saying with regards to that about how a country wouldn't. Is I would ask people to investigate the Gulf of Tonkin incident in Vietnam, because the entire Vietnamese War was based on the Gulf of Tonkin. and the Gulf of Tonkin has now kind of been debunked as not actually a official firefight between the communist Vietnamese and the Americans, but was staged to make it look like that, so the US could go into Vietnam, which obviously turned out to be a very, very long, drawn out, I guess, effectively stalemate.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this:
because as soon as China got involved, that was it.
Yeah, the bit that I do believe after is if you look at what George W. Bush and Tony Blair did in terms of the evidence that they had against Saddam Hussein, clearly false, clearly fraudulent, arguably war crimes, that kind of stuff I buy into. But I think ultimately somebody had to pay for that. Whether the right people paid or not, I don't know. Certainly, they weren't certainly innocent in the acts that they were taken upon. But really, truthfully, were we then? If you examine that, I don't know. I don't want to be too.
I suspect the whole world was the whole, and I'm hoping that in the future the truth does come out, whether it be what you guys believe or whether it's what I believe or a mixture of the two. I don't think it makes a difference. I think. But ultimately, if it turned out the whole world was forced to turn and stare at this one country and go, you. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
They had very few allies.
I get that. I'm curious. I think I know the answer. Obviously, Andy is the only one out of us that has served and might have a take, and I think I know the answer, but I'm just curious. Andy, I'm assuming, without putting words in your mouth, that you accept what you saw as what happened, and therefore you don't subscribe to the sort of conspiracy theory that it's something else.
I'd say but then I can't say I've done any investigation. I hear stories of the other guys showing the building and stuff, but I can't say I've actually looked into that and fact check stuff. But then I did hear a thing about someone was saying it was actually the government that said it was fake. I mean, not to be truthful, but just to throw a bit more, stir the pot a bit,
muddy the waters a little bit.
Because I think it's the Matrix films where they say they're a perfect world, but then people start to reject it. Whereas if you throw a bit of spice in there and a bit of chaos, more people believe in in the ideology of the Western world, I suppose. So if they say do something like that, like 9/11 or whatever. I don't know.
So that take is that effectively, if it's let's say the American government, if they did that, let's say to stir the pot, and that's not been disrespectful at all. And I don't necessarily believe this. I'm just saying this plain devil's advocate. They did that so that they could almost rally more people around the American cause, and therefore, is that what you're saying?
So obviously you got the attack, and then people are going to be like, shit, we need to do something about this. Let's go nuke someone or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you're going to get people there I still don't think, violence is the answer or whatever. So then you just throw a little bit of information out here there. It just captures more of a pool of people, doesn't it, I suppose?
It does make you question how it was reported and when it was reported, and timelines of certain events. And going back to what Ken said about, people reporting maybe buildings that have come down where clearly they haven't, or phone calls that have been made, or photos that have been taken. And it does sort of make you think, are we being manipulated in some way as to what we thought?
I don't doubt for a second the media has its own agenda. I despise the printed press. I despise the news. It has its own agenda.
I would 100%, by the way, like to echo exactly what you said. You're not going to find a staunchest ally than me on that one. I genuinely believe that 99% of what we're told, even today, listening to the news on the radio, I think it was 9 out of the 10 stories were negative and bad and made. And then there was one fluff piece at the end about I can't remember. It was just so vacuous it didn't even Mayweather, but I agree. I think the media has had its own agenda for a very, very long period of time, and there are a vast amount of people out there who will inhale it and accept that that is what the truth is. And I am, while it's not a popular mindset for people to accept, but I don't believe everything we're told is factual. Hence why I don't believe that what we were told in 9/11, as unbelievable as it was, I think there's more to this than just what the story we saw and the story that we've been given, even by the 9/11 report. I don't believe that what we're told is wholly the truth.
And it's really interesting because I've said in previous sort of podcast, previous episode, that I sort of feel, Ken are a bit like kindred spirits here in terms of, I believe that there's something a bit dodgy with Area 51, and I believe that the moon landings are potentially something a bit dodgy, and I believe, but the 9/11, I'm really struggling with, genuinely struggling with seeing how, if what people are saying is the truth in terms of the conspiracy, that's like, wow. That's even more wow than the plane hitting the tower. 100%. That's more, and I'm not saying I subscribe to that, and I'm really wrestling with.
No, absolutely. That's the whole thing about it is to question it, is to look at the facts, and then as you've already stated on this podcast, guys, that there are things that don't add up. So I'm not saying that there you go, there's your smoking gun. What I'm saying is the bits that don't add up. We'll look further into those, dig a little bit deeper, and you'll end up in a rabbit hole. It's like watching YouTube videos late at night. 1 minute you're watching about something really interesting that you really enjoy, and then 3 hours later you're watching a video about cats climbing a roof. I don't know. You end up in a rabbit hole. But I genuinely feel that this is not as monumental as it was. Something, whether it was an absolutely barbaric and evil work of terrorism and a terrorism organization to literally try and stab America in the heart and say we can do this anytime we like, or whether it was the military industrial complex deciding that actually, you know what, we need a war here, so what can we do? But again, that's not for me to tell people what to think.
But I do think you're right to ask the questions, though, and I think everybody's right to ask the questions. Those questions might come back to and say, actually, no, this is how it is.
Yeah. But interestingly, war does make money.
Yes.
It does.
And you raise a good point. And war does make money. War does. This is going to sound a horrible phrase, but rally the troops and stuff. There's a common enemy, there's a common goal, and whether you're Democrat, Republican, there's the common goal. We're not fighting each other now. There's the common, So it does galvanise a country as such, doesn't it? So,
of course, it does.
Leaders in wartime have the higher. The higher backing from voters. It can affect polls. It can affect polls. So 100%. You're quite right in what you say there. There is a political,
but I think
financial edge to it.
But I think, Ken, and you are right. I think whether it's us at TBR or Tiddy Shine or whoever it may be, ask the question. Do you know what I mean? If there's a question to be asked, ask the question. Do I necessarily think there's a question to be asked? Possibly. Do I believe in what that answer might be? Probably not. Do I think that what we were told happened? Yes, I probably do in this occasion.
I think part of it is just like it wasn't even done. I mean, George W. Bush was in charge and he took over on January the 20th, 2001. So it was 8 months into his presidential reign, so to speak. So it wasn't like it was done to like on an election year to make sure he won the election. No. This was done so early in his election, so early into his tenureship, that it's almost effectively, so it's like, all right, let's see. Let's get the people behind it. Let's as Gaz says, rally the troops, get people around a common goal. Let's effectively, let's have a war.
Yeah.
But I know that's not but that again, that only comes, that sort of thought or that sort of thinking pattern only comes from looking into it, investigating. And I'm sure, and I wholeheartedly expect people in the comments to say Ken's an absolute lunatic. He's mad. He's one of those guys. He's a weirdo. It's just like, I'm not going to back down on that one. This is who I am, and this is how I think. And I will investigate things like this because I don't think it's as we're told. But again, it's just, I'm not telling people what to think. I'm just saying, just look somewhere, look at some things that even people who will watch this now, who wholeheartedly believe that this happened as we're told, there must be some things that, even one thing that you must think is hinky. That
ask
is weird.
questions. Always ask questions.
Take that and then use that to actually focus on that. So, right, so that doesn't make sense to me. Okay, I'm going to look at this. Okay, and then that doesn't. Oh, and then you lead off.
Yeah.
And he's just like, and I realize, as Adam says, ask questions. Always ask the questions. If you don't ask, you never get the answer.
Yeah, and it's that thirst, TBR.
We spoke about this before. The thirst for knowledge, humanity.
The thirst for knowledge. It is that thirst of knowing, isn't it?
I'm also going to chuck one out there as well. Dixon Flannel, who we talked about a couple of episodes back now.
With your shirt. Yeah.
Exactly, great
nice
shirt.
Nice shirt.
Which we were giving away. But their the slogan around their company: work hard, stay humble, question authority. Question authority. Great slogan. Great slogan.
I think that's got a lot. That's very, very poignant now, especially with what's going on in America with the Black Lives Matter movement, the pro-Trump movement, the especially with the situation in Portland over the course of the last few days, which you never want to believe that people from the same country can end up turning on each other and murdering each other in the streets. But that's what's happening in America right now, and I think there's a situation there where you end up everybody ends up in different camps. You see the Black Lives Matter or the All Lives Matter group or the Blue Lives Matter group, and effectively there's no reason for authoritative murder, which appears to be what some American policemen do. That doesn't make them all bad. It just means, as we say in English, it's like one bad apple.
Yeah, and I don't profess to know enough about American sociology, political history to sort of form a massive opinion, other than what seems to be the social injustice at the moment, in my opinion, is wrong.
Yes.
And I don't know enough to say why that is or how they're going to get out of that, but some of the things that have happened recently in America leave a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth in terms of what's and that's a completely different podcast episode. But the question of the authority is
it is. And I think it's a great point now to draw a line under this one, because the one thing that we all believe, we all believe in different things here and different aspects of it, but the one thing we all agree, it was just something absolutely awful that we never want to see happen ever again. We don't want to see the likes of this ever again. It's sickening. So we're going to say thank you and we're going to say goodbye. So who wants to go first in saying their so longs? Ken, do you want to go first?
I might as well. I read this is a much more I think serious and somber episode of the show, and I think I think it was I think the whole situation was very respectfully handled, and we discussed it in a way that I think not only answers some questions and how we all feel, but I think it also raises some questions, and hopefully people take something away from this. So I appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you to the listeners and the viewers for your continued support. So thank you very much indeed, guys.
Well, thank you for coming up with the idea, Ken, actually, because I
appreciate it.
Because it's a difficult one. It's a tough one, but I do think it's something that needs to be talked about. It needs to be kept out there. Gaza?
I say, sorry to interrupt, Gaz. I think if there's anybody, as Gaz echoed earlier on, to echo Gaz, sorry, I think if there's anybody who was there, or anybody from America who wants to chime in in the comments, or I believe they can leave a voice message. Is it, Adam? They can do it on the website?
Anchor. Yeah, go on to the Anchor app. You can leave a voice message. We can play it.
Amazing. I think it'd be amazing to have a follow up with like a 9/11, like commentators version, where people give us their take on it. What were they doing? How did they feel? What changes to their lives did come with? Because as you said, we're 4 guys from the UK. Yes, it hit us in very different ways, but it's affected all our lives, everybody in the world. And I would love to hear what people from America who were listening were doing that day, how they felt, and what changes it meant, and how they feel now about it 19 years on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great, guys. But maybe not only viewers and listeners in America, Finland, the Netherlands, India, where, if you're listening to us wherever it may be,
absolutely,
it would be fascinating to see whether or not it resonated as much with you guys as it did with us. So by all means, drop us a soundbite on Anchor and get in touch with us via a comment on YouTube, whatever it may be.
Tallboyradio.com.
Tallboyradio.com.
Interact with us.
There's lots of different ways you can get in touch with us. So it's been fascinating. It's been fascinating to hear the insight from Andy and Ken. I'd like to think we did it in a respectful way, but as Ken said, maybe answer a few questions, but maybe leave you thinking that if there are questions that then still need to be answered, that perhaps you might question them. So it's been great, loved it, and I'll see you next time, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andy?
Just echo what everyone else has said. Also, don't believe what you read in the news.
100%.
There you go.
I think we finished on a Morrissey quote before about not reading the news. So all I'm going to say, I'm going to finish on another Morrissey quote.
Go on.
In your wildest dreams, you would never believe that people are the same everywhere.